Before we settle in for the night, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these gentle journeys through history's quieter corners. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your world. It's always comforting to see our community gather here as the day winds down. Now, get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillow, dim the lights, and let's drift slowly into the everyday rhythms of ancient Rome together. You wake to the sound of voices drifting through thin walls, chickens clucking somewhere below, the cry of a baby echoing from another apartment. Welcome to your morning in a Roman insula, the ancient world's version of apartment living. These buildings rose several stories high, packed tightly along narrow streets. The higher your floor, the cheaper your rent, and the more precarious your living situation. You're on the third or fourth level, which means wooden stairs that creak with every step and ceilings that sag slightly when your upstairs neighbor moves furniture. Your room is small, perhaps 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls are plain plaster, sometimes decorated with simple painted lines if the previous tenant was ambitious. There's a narrow bed stuffed with straw, a wool blanket that smells faintly of lanolin and smoke, and very little else. No kitchen. Cooking inside these wooden structures was forbidden. Too much risk of fire spreading through the entire building. Instead, you'll buy your meals from street vendors or eat at small taverns throughout the day. The morning air is cool. You can see your breath in winter months. In summer, the heat makes the small space stifling. There's a tiny window, really just an opening in the wall, that lets in air and the sounds of the city waking up below. You reach for your tunic, a simple woolen garment that falls to your knees. If you're fortunate, you have a second one for washing day. If not, this one serves until it can't anymore. Sandals wait by the bed, leather straps worn soft from use. The chamber pot in the corner needs emptying. This is one of those tasks you don't think about until you're carrying it down those narrow stairs, trying not to spill, heading for the public latrines or the street drainage channels. Outside your door, the building is already alive with sound. Neighbors arguing, someone coughing, children running through halls. The smell of bread baking somewhere drifts up from a shop on the ground floor, mixing with less pleasant odors. This is home. Not comfortable by modern standards, but familiar. You know which stairs to avoid because they're rotted. You know which neighbors to greet and which to pass silently. You know the rhythm of this place because it's been the same for as long as you can remember. And now the day begins properly. The walk to the public latrine is already routine. These facilities line certain streets, built over flowing water channels that carry waste away from the city. Well, in theory. In practice, the system works adequately most days and poorly on others. Inside, you find a long stone bench with circular openings carved at intervals. No doors, no dividers, just a row of seats where Romans of all social classes sit side by side, conducting their morning business while chatting about weather, politics, or the price of grain. The flowing water beneath is supposed to carry everything away. A smaller channel runs in front of the bench where a sponge on a stick, the tersorium, sits in vinegar water. This communal cleaning tool is shared among everyone. You try not to think too hard about it. Conversations happen naturally here. It's considered normal, even neighborly. Someone mentions a new merchant in the forum. Another complains about rent increases. An old man discusses his grandson's upcoming marriage. You nod politely, finish your business, and leave. There's a basin near the exit for washing hands. The water has been there since morning. You rinse briefly and step back into the street. Breakfast, such as it is, waits. Most Romans don't eat elaborately in the morning. Breakfast, or ientaculum, is simple fuel rather than celebration. Bread forms the foundation. Dense, chewy, sometimes a day or two old. You buy it from a street vendor for a few bronze coins. If you have a copper or two extra, you might add some cheese. Hard, salty, made from goat or sheep milk. Occasionally there are olives. Rarely, a bit of honey to spread on the bread if you're feeling extravagant, or if it's a festival day. Wine is common even this early, but always diluted with water.
Drinking it straight is considered barbaric. The mixture is weak enough to hydrate while providing a slight warmth against the morning chill. You stand near a fountain, chewing slowly, watching the city come to life. Merchants set up stalls. Workers head to construction sites. Children are shooed towards schools or apprenticeships. Everyone moves with purpose. The bread sits heavy in your stomach.
The cheese leaves your mouth dry. But it's enough. Enough to get you through the morning's labor. Enough to keep you upright until the midday meal. Rome doesn't wait for anyone to feel fully satisfied. The city moves forward, and you move with it. If you're among the working majority of Romans, your labor begins early. The sun is barely climbing when you arrive at your place of employment. Perhaps you're a laborer, hauling materials for one of the endless construction projects scattered across the city. Maybe you work in a shop, crafting pottery, repairing shoes, or weaving cloth. Or you might be a porter, carrying goods through crowded streets for merchants too important to carry their own parcels. The work is physical. Hours are long. Rest breaks are brief. You toil until midday, when the heat becomes too intense and even the most demanding employers allow workers to pause. If you're fortunate enough to have a trade, your work requires focus. Potters shape clay with practiced hands. Leather workers cut and stitch with precision. Bakers time their ovens carefully to avoid burning expensive flour. The labor is repetitive but requires skill. Apprentices watch and learn. Masters correct and guide. This is how knowledge passes from generation to generation, one calloused hand to another. Women work too, though their labor often goes unrecorded. Spinning wool, weaving cloth, managing households, selling vegetables in markets, assisting in family shops. Their contributions keep the city functioning even as history rarely writes their names. By midday, everyone is tired, hungry, ready for a break that won't come for hours yet. The afternoon brings slight relief from morning's intensity, but not much. After a brief pause for food, usually more bread, perhaps some vegetables or legumes if available, work resumes. The heat in summer is oppressive. Shade is precious. Those who can work indoors count themselves lucky. Those laboring outside move more slowly, conserving energy, drinking water when they can find it. Romans don't have weekends in the modern sense. They have festivals, many of them, scattered throughout the year. But daily work continues regardless. 7 days might pass without rest if no religious holiday intervenes. The afternoons blend together. Same tasks, same faces, same streets walked day after day. There's comfort in routine, even when the routine is exhausting. Eventually, as the sun begins its descent, work concludes. Tools are cleaned and stored. Shops are closed. Workers disperse toward home or toward the baths, depending on their means and their level of exhaustion. The working day is over, but the day itself continues. For those who can afford the entrance fee, a few copper coins, the public baths offer one of Rome's great democratic pleasures. Here, wealthy and poor bathe in the same pools, though not necessarily at the same time or in the same manner. The baths are architectural marvels. Heated floors, multiple pools of varying temperatures, exercise yards, spaces for socializing. For many Romans, especially those living in cramped insulae, the baths are the closest thing to luxury they'll ever experience. You pay your fee and enter. The changing room is crowded. You strip and leave your clothes in a cubby, hoping they'll still be there when you return. Theft is common enough that some people bring a slave or friend to watch their belongings. First, the tepidarium, a warm pool to acclimate your body. Then the caldarium, hot enough to make you sweat. Finally, the frigidarium, shockingly cold, which closes your pores and leaves you feeling refreshed. The water itself is not changed frequently. You're essentially bathing in the same water as dozens of others throughout the day, but it's warm, it's relaxing, and after a day of labor, it feels like mercy. Around you, conversations flow. Business deals are discussed. Gossip is shared. Friendships are maintained. The baths are as much social center as hygiene facility. Eventually, you emerge, cleaner if not entirely clean, and dress in your tunic once more. The walk home is pleasant. Your muscles are loose. Your mind is calm. For a few hours at least, life feels almost comfortable. Evening settles over Rome like a heavy blanket. The streets begin to empty as people return to their homes, but the city never truly sleeps. Noise continues. Voices, cartwheels, the occasional argument or celebration. Dinner, or cena, is the main meal of the day. For most Romans, it's simple. A thick porridge made from barley or wheat. Perhaps some vegetables if they're in season and affordable. Occasionally, rarely, a bit of fish or meat. You eat sitting on your bed or on a stool. There's no table, no elaborate setting. Just a bowl, a spoon, and the day's fatigue settling into your bones. The food is filling without being satisfying. Salt and olive oil provide most of the flavor. Garum, that pungent fermented fish sauce, adds intensity to otherwise bland dishes. Bread soaks up what remains in the bowl. Wine, again diluted, washes it down. By now, you've had several cups throughout the day, enough to take the edge off exhaustion without impairing judgment too severely. After eating, there's little to do. No electric lights. Oil lamps are expensive to burn continuously. Most people simply go to bed shortly after sunset, especially in winter when nights are long and cold. You lie down on your straw mattress. Pull the wool blanket over yourself. Listen to the sounds of the building settling. Your neighbor coughs. Someone's baby cries. Footsteps echo on the stairs. Sleep comes gradually, pulled down by the weight of physical labor and the knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly the same. And so the cycle continues. Life in ancient Rome, for the average person, was not an adventure. It was routine, predictable, occasionally harsh, but mostly just repetitive. You worked, you ate, you slept, and then you woke to do it all again. There were no grand ambitions unless you were born into wealth or extraordinary luck. There was only survival, maintaining yourself and your family day by day, hoping that illness, fire, or economic collapse didn't sweep through and erase everything you'd built. The city around you was magnificent. Temples gleamed. Aqueducts carried water across impossible distances. The Colosseum hosted spectacles that drew thousands. But you rarely thought about those marvels. They existed in a different Rome, one you glimpsed occasionally but never truly inhabited. Your Rome was narrow streets and cramped rooms, bread vendors and public latrines, long hours of labor and brief moments of rest. It was ordinary in every sense, which is precisely what made it real. History remembers emperors and generals, philosophers and poets, but most Romans were none of those things. They were workers, parents, neighbors, people whose names were never carved in stone, but whose lives, collectively, built and sustained the empire. And when you think about it that way, perhaps the ordinary becomes remarkable after all. Not because it was glamorous or easy, but because it endured. Because millions of people lived these quiet, repetitive lives and somehow found meaning in them. They raised children who raised children. They taught skills that persisted for generations. They maintained traditions that outlasted empires. The Rome you lived in wasn't the Rome of legend, but it was the Rome that mattered most, the one that kept the city breathing, working, surviving day after unremarkable day. And now, as your eyes grow heavy and sleep approaches, you can rest knowing that tomorrow will come,
bringing with it the same routines, the same challenges, the same small comforts that make life bearable. The city will wake. You will wake with it, and the cycle will continue, as it always has, as it always will, until one day it doesn't. But that's a thought for another time. For now, there's only sleep, and the quiet knowledge that you've survived another day in ancient Rome. Good night.